Dodge Viper GTS Coupe is a true American icon. It was produced from 1996 to 2002, but nothing represents it better than the very first year of production painted in the iconic GTS blue with white racing stripes. The car made its debut as a concept back in December 31st, 1992 at the LA Auto Show, and it was an instant hit. Everybody wanted to know when it was going to go into production and when they could get their hands on it. The car was designed by Chrysler designer Bob Hubach, apologies if I mispronounced the last name, and he took design inspirations from such cars as the Ferrari 250 GTO and the Shelby Cobra Daytona Coupe, incorporating design features like the elongated hood, the double bubble roof, as well as the rear duckbill spoiler. Now, an interesting thing about the Dodge Viper GTS Coupe is one of the first cars that Chrysler utilized wind tunnel development testing to get the aerodynamics right on this car. And they used one of the wind tunnels that Lockheed Martin had. Now, this car isn't just an RT10 with a roof added onto it. The second generation Dodge Viper is truly that, a second generation. When they went and designed this car, they went and upgraded everything. Suspension, brakes, engine, interior, the whole 9 yards. And in fact, from the exterior standpoint, the only body panels that's the same between the second generation car and the first generation car are the door panel skins themselves. Everything else is brand new for the second generation car. The second generation car also was the first year to have roll-up windows as well as exterior door handles. So when the GTS Coupe finally went on sale, Chrysler decided the way they wanted to go about the sales was to reward the Viper loyal. So if you were an original owner of a first generation Viper and still had that car, Chrysler sent you a voucher enabling you to go down to your dealership of choice and purchase your new GTS Coupe. So dealers couldn't just randomly order as many GTS Coupes as they wanted. They actually had to have a voucher in hand to be able to place that order. And the very first GTS Coupe rolled off the assembly line on May 6, 1996. Chrysler had hoped to be able to start getting these cars in the hands of the owners before the Indy 500 of that year, which was on May 26, because the GTS Coupe was the pace car. Unfortunately, there was an issue at the supply chain for the wheels, and they weren't able to get the cars rolled out until early June. Now at the Indy 500, there were two pace cars built, and the way they were modified was a sunroof put in the top, strobe lights, and decals identifying it as the Indy 500 pace car. Now at a later date, Chrysler did offer 100 sets of those decals available to Dodge dealerships so that the Viper enthusiasts that really wanted to make their Viper stand out could order those decals and put them on their Vipers. There were no pace car edition GTS Coupes produced from the factory. Now, after the first year of production for the GTS Coupe, a grand total of 1,166 coupes were produced. 1,163 of them were the GTS blue and white stripes, but a select 3 were the inverse white with the GTS blue stripes. And the reason that was, Chrysler knew that in the future they were going to offer a metallic stripe, and so they wanted to test it out, being able to do the metallic paint in the stripe. And so they had one of the Chrysler executives decide they wanted to do a test for their car, do the white base with the GTS blue stripes. Word got out and 2 more executives wanted to have it done as well, so a grand total of 3 coupes were produced in the white and the blue stripes. And I believe as of making this video, all 3 of those cars are still in the hands of their original owners. Now, due to such demand, the blue and white did roll over onto 1997 model year, but only 965 of those were produced. Now, even though there were less produced in 97 than there were in 96, 96 still brings a bigger premium in the secondary market today. And there were a couple of differences between the 96 and 97 paint jobs. Let's go over those details. So between 96 and 97, they made a couple of changes to the stripes on the GTS Coupe. And the first change that they did was they made the stripes a 1/4 inch narrower because it was so difficult to paint the stripes over the front fascia. And so that with the narrower stripes, it was easier to paint those out. Now the other difference between the 96 and 97 that's even more obvious on the stripes was 96 was the only year that they painted the stripes behind the license plate. It was another one of those changes that they made because of the difficulty of the process doing it in the factory. So 97, you won't see the paint behind the license plate. Of course, the heart and soul of any Dodge Viper is its V10 engine. Now, there are rumors out there that this is the same engine that's from the Ram truck. That's simply not the case. For starters, the Ram engine is cast iron. This one's all aluminum. Now, when Dodge started the development of this engine, they did take one of the pre-production engines from the Ram line to start their development work, but dimensionally, there's no parts that are interchanged between these two engines. Now, what was really amazing to me that I found out was between the Gen 1 V10 and the Gen 2 V10, they were actually able to shave a total of 80 pounds out of the wet engine. That's a huge accomplishment. They also increased the power to 450 horsepower and 490 foot-pounds of torque, which makes this car an absolute beast to drive. Now, of course, the Gen 2 car, they did a lot of other upgrades over the Gen 1 car, a lot of changes in the suspension, going to a cast aluminum control arms as well as steering knuckles, and the full interior upgrades. Let's go ahead and take a look at those next. So the interior on the Gen 2 Dodge Viper got a complete makeover from the first generation car. Full leather black interior and a new steering wheel design to incorporate the new dual standard airbags. Now, because of the loss of the glove box compartment due to the airbag on the passenger side, a glove box was situated in the center of the console, as well as a little net area with more container space. They also went and did a whole new instrument cluster layout, and then the seat belts had to be relocated to the inside versus the outside where they normally would have been because of the changes to the doors with the exterior door handles as well as the roll-up windows. Let's go ahead and take this car out and see how it does on the road. So in 1996, when the GTS Coupe came out, it did 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds and a standing quarter mile in a low 12s. That was moving pretty good back in the early 90s. Let's go ahead and show you what it does. Gotta love the feel of that hard acceleration from that 8-liter V10. There is nothing like it in the world. And when this car came out in 1996, the only cars that were really faster were the Lamborghini Diablo and the Ferrari F50. It basically destroyed everything else on the market at the time. The car is ridiculously fast in stock form. Now, of course, mine here has been modified quite a bit, and it's definitely increased on the horsepower. The sheer torque from this thing is just amazing. So what I forgot to mention earlier in regards to some of the changes on the exterior styling of this car was the major changes were done to the hood. So they added vents on either side as well as adding the NASA duct for the intake. So the vents on either side, what they discovered on the Gen 1 cars was during at speed, the air would develop pressure underneath the hood in the engine compartment and cause the hood to actually bulge up. So as a result, in the Gen 2 hood, they added the vents to help relieve that pressure and keep the hood from bulging. Now, like many people of my age, when the car came out in 96, we were just blown away by it. I have, of course, had a poster of it on my bedroom wall, which now that poster is sitting on the wall in my garage above the car, and it's just a dream come true to be able to finally own one of these cars. I bought my first one in 2011, January of 2011, and I just fell in love immediately. When I bought the car, I had a 2002 Z06 Corvette, and when I sold it to buy this, well, not this Viper, but my ACR, the person that bought it was a broker, and he told me that, because I told him that I was buying a Viper, and he said that I was going to get tired of it, and it was abusive and brute and all this stuff that a Viper is, and that when I got tired of it, to keep his number and give him a call, and he would be more than willing to buy it from me. And I told him back then, I was like, I appreciate the offer. I said, I'll definitely keep your number. I said, but I'm not going to be selling the car. And sure enough, when I got the ACR, I fell in love. It was all over again. I was that little kid that saw it for the first time and was just in awe. So the first time I'd seen one in person was in 96 when they came out. Santa Rosa Dodge had one, and my dad took me down to look at it, and it was sitting there on the showroom all roped off because of course it was a customer's car, because like I mentioned earlier, you had to be an owner of an RT10 to be able to be eligible to purchase a GTS Coupe. And so we go in and we see this car, and it was memory that will last with me forever. And so I knew then that I was going to have one. And of course I always wanted the 96 in the blue and white. And my first one, of course, was a 2001 ACR, which was an amazing car. I mean, I absolutely loved that car. And I drove the wheels off of it. I mean, it was my daily driver for a few years even. And it was, every experience I had for the most part was just magical with that car. And when I wrecked it, I knew that I had an opportunity to buy my dream 96. And I debated on whether or not to buy the 96, or if a 97 was good enough, or if I wanted to get something entirely different than a Viper. And finally I narrowed down to it. I said, no, you know what? I've got the cash. We've got the opportunity. Let's buy that dream 96. And so the search started. And it took me, it didn't take too long. I did being so heavily involved in the Viper Club and having so many connections nationally, it wasn't too difficult to go ahead and find a 96. The hard part was finding the right 96. And I debated on whether or not a 97 was acceptable, but at the end of the day, I knew I wouldn't have been as happy with the 97 as the 96, just not from a difference in how the cars behaved or performed or anything, because they're basically identical, but just knowing that the 96 is the first year of production. So I went ahead, started looking for the 96, and what I wanted was basically, I wanted a really low mileage clean car, and ideally either stock or had modifications that I wanted on it. And so I started looking, and there were 3 that had met the criteria at the time that I was looking. And one of them was in Chicago, and I had ruled that one out because it was basically a museum piece. It only had 1,500 miles on it, and I knew that I would only be devaluing that car by putting miles on it. I mean, I've put 30,000 miles on this car since I've had it. And so I knew that wasn't going to be the one for me. Plus, I knew that if I started putting miles on that car being 20 years old and having only 1,500 miles on it, it was going to start needing maintenance and work done to it, and I just didn't want to get into that. So then there happened to be 2 for sale here in California at the time. One in the Bay Area at a exotic car dealership, and it was a decent car, but it was a little overpriced for the market at the time. And then there was this one, and this one was located in Fresno. And this car checked all the right boxes. It had all the right upgrades done to it with the carb-approved Edelbrock headers and the Borla Race exhaust system, which is my favorite exhaust system on these Vipers. And it had the 355 gears, and I just knew this car was right. And the price was right. And so we went down, struck a deal with the car, and the rest is history. And I mean, I've had this car now about almost 6 years. I've had this one longer than I had my ACR, which is really surprising. It's amazing how time flies. But this car has just done so much for me and opened up my experience in the auto community so much. I've met so many great people. For a while, I was president of the Northern California Viper Owners Association. I've met so many friends, and it's just been a great experience. Got to meet a bunch of people from Chrysler, who I still stay in contact with, and it's just been a great car and a great experience. And of course, if you watch my video on whether or not these cars are reliable, you know that for the most part, they're pretty bulletproof. I mean, this car has been rock solid. I mean, there's been a few things that I've had to do, but nothing crazy outrageous. And that's one of the things that I love about it. I've gone back and forth a few times on debating to sell this car since then, but every time I think about it and I go and even just look at the car, let alone get behind the wheel and drive it, I'm just like, no, the car is not going anywhere. I just love this car so much, and it was one of the first dream cars that I had growing up, and just having that memories, and I just absolutely in love with this car. It is a true brute, and it is a race car for the streets, and the looks it gets, the design really is timeless. I get compliments on this thing everywhere I go, and it is always positive feedback on this car. So I can't let it go. it just brings too much joy to me to ever think about parting with this car. Now, of course, I say that, but a wise man once told me that everything's for sale at the right price. And I'm sure if somebody offered me a ridiculous amount of money for this car, I would probably consider selling it. I'd probably regret it afterwards if I did, because the car is just absolutely an amazing machine, and I have so much fun with it that I'd probably end up having to buy another one. So, of course, if you weren't aware, all Vipers had a 6-speed manual transmission. There were no automatic options. It's just the way they always were. So from the interior standpoint, the only things that I've really changed on the interior was I replaced the shifter with a short throw shifter from Ibsco, and then changed the shift handle with one from MGW. And then I also went ahead and painted the Sneaky Pete logo on the airbag, just to give it a little bit of color on the interior, considering it's all black except for like the white on the gauge faces. Now, of course, the AC on these cars is iffy at best, and right now mine's not working quite right. But even when they do work on these cars, they're not the greatest. And you have 5 vents. You have 3 in the dash, and then you have 1 on each side. And it's basically right where the crotch is, both on the driver's side and the passenger side. So one fun thing I should note, that this is actually going to be my 50th video on YouTube, and I just started the channel just after Christmas of 2019. So I'm really excited to bring this review to you for my 50th video. And so that's my review of the 1996 Dodge Viper GTS Coupe. I hope you found this video entertaining and helpful, maybe useful. And if you did, go ahead and give us a like, hit that thumbs up. And as always, if you want to be kept up to speed of all of the videos that I upload in the future, go ahead and smash that subscription button down below and ring the notification bell, so that way YouTube notifies you of all the videos that I upload in the future, and I will see you the next video.